Well, I actually did do my Archbishop Tutu dance on stage because I'm so excited to have the honor and privilege of being with these two incredible women to talk about the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, another extraordinarily important subject which slips off too many stages and too many boardrooms and too many everything. Shabana, it's wonderful to see you again. Malala, it's wonderful to see you again. And we are three generations. Actually, you're in the middle. You know, it's strictly speaking, you know, if we're, but we know, but we are, we know.
That's right.
She's the young one. And I'm really passionate about this subject because I had the honor as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights on the 8th of March, 2002, of being in Kabul. I'd actually arrived a few days earlier. I linked with Nolene Hager, who was head of UNIFEM at the time, and she had worked with a number of Afghan women, and I met them about 2 days before the 8th of March, and I was astonished because, you know, Afghanistan had been under the Taliban rule, and the women I met were lawyers, judges, teachers, you know, extraordinary women, and they had drawn up their charter for women's rights, and it was in the old cinema in Kabul, which had been destroyed by the Taliban, but the women wanted to have their event there because they had loved going to the cinema in the old days, and so they cleared the rubble. The UN put a cover on the roof, and it was a safe space. They didn't wear the burqa that day, and they came in. But actually, to my surprise, when I came in, the first 9 rows were all bearded men. Things hadn't changed completely at the time. And in row, it was probably about row 9, eventually a woman got up to promote the Charter of Women's Rights. And I have such memories of the hopes that were there at that time. And so, Shabana, I want to ask you, first of all, fast forward to what it was like just before the Taliban took over again, and then what is like now?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an honor to share the stage with both of you and to be here again. Obviously, the situation in Afghanistan is horrifying right now. March 2022 was when Taliban legally banned girls from attending secondary school. Towards the end of the year, December of 2022, was when women were legally banned from attending higher education. They have issued decrees after decrees restricting women's rights. If you're a woman in Afghanistan today, you cannot go to parks, you cannot go to the gym, you cannot drive, you cannot have a license, you cannot speak in the public. You cannot be seen by male doctors, and most recently, women cannot train to become midwives and nurses. That's now. But just before the Taliban took over, we've gained, and between the first Taliban regime, the fall of the first Taliban regime, and August of 2021, we had incredible progress. Afghanistan was, despite all the challenges, young girls were going to school. Women were thriving as activists, as civil servants, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as civil society leaders, as people who really care deeply about elevating life for everyone. And yet, there were still some challenges. Even prior to Taliban taking over in August of 2021, there was a Human Rights Watch report that came out in 2017 that really pointed to the fact that 63% of high school age or school age girls in Afghanistan were not in school. So there were still some challenges, and it was against that backdrop that we founded SOLA as the first and only boarding school for girls in Afghanistan.
And Malala, to your great credit from Pakistan, with your passion for education, you've also taken on a championing of girls and women in Afghanistan, and in particular, a kind of acknowledgement of their courage and their resistance and their determination. And you produced a great documentary, Bread and Roses, last year. Tell us why you think a film would help, how you want to get the story out, and are you happy with how it's been received?
I became a part of this documentary, Bread and Roses, a few years ago, and it's finally on Apple TV+, so you all can watch it. And part of the reason why I wanted to do that was to actually help people see what exactly is happening in Afghanistan. A lot of us hear about it, we just read one headline, or we never actually hear that much anymore. So this documentary was a way to bring awareness to the stories of 3 Afghan women who were all working women. One of them was a dentist, and how all of them actually lost their jobs, and whatever they had worked really hard for because of the Taliban's new regime of restrictions and basically taking away every right from them. And one story that really stood out to me was that of Dr. Zahra, who had worked so hard to become a dentist. And she had just opened her clinic. When the Taliban took control, she had to actually remove every sign, any proof that could tell that this was a female dentist. She was hiding her identity. Women who had worked so hard for their education were removing every sign of it. And I have heard stories of the women's soccer team, how they were hiding their uniform, how they were hiding their trophies, and how these women who are in different professions are removing every sign so that the Taliban could never find out because they face threats. And Dr. Zahra's clinic actually changes into a place of organizing protests. And you see in this documentary how each and every day these Afghan women come together and they advocate and they protest against the Taliban, and they are actually calling the international community to do more for them. When you finish the documentary, I think it leaves you heartbroken, but what's far worse is actually realizing that the situation has only worsened since this documentary was completed. The Taliban have issued more than 100 decrees and edicts, taking away any possible right and opportunity that you could think of from women and girls. Afghan activists and other human rights lawyers are calling it a gender apartheid because this is beyond just gender discrimination. This is systematic oppression at such a high scale that we need the right word for it, to recognize it and then hold the perpetrators like the Taliban accountable for it.
Yeah. And let's move on now to education, which I think all 3 of us have a passion for. And Shabana, you grew up in Kabul under the first Taliban regime, and I have read that you actually were disguised as a boy for a while, but going to a girls' school, a secret girls' school. But in fact, you confessed to me that you were 12 in 2002, and therefore you did have the opportunity after that for education. And Malala, you knew what it was like to be under Taliban rule because it also affected you, even though you were in Pakistan. And you, I understand, were banned for a few months at the age of 11, and that turned you into a passionate advocate for education. And that caused you, at the age of 15, to pay a high price and be shot for your beliefs. But I want to ask both of you, why are the Taliban so afraid of girls and women getting education? What's in it for them? Yeah, why? Shabana, first you,
It's quite simple. Educated girls go on to become educated women, and they go on to decide their own futures. They go on to become teachers, business owners, and in some cases, presidents of countries, and they take on... And women tend to, as leaders, take on really difficult issues. I know I'm about to generalize, but men tend to be really drawn to power, where women as leaders are drawn to bringing everybody along, and they take on an inclusive approach, fight for the rights of others. And so I remember a very stark moment right after Taliban took over Afghanistan, and it was the women. All those loud male leaders disappeared, and it was the women in Afghanistan who poured into the streets of our cities and faced Taliban with guns.
I remember seeing photographs of that.
And there's this one moment where a Talib soldier points the gun to a face of a woman, and the woman holds the gun and starts reciting verses from Quran and sayings of Prophet Muhammad and discounting the Taliban's religious excuse for excluding women from public space.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you see the horror and the fear in the eyes of that Talib soldier and not of the woman. And so I believe they're afraid of women because women have agency when they're educated.
Yeah.
And they go on to benefit not just girls and women, but everybody in our societies.
Yeah. Malala, I've no doubt you agree with this, but would you like to add your own thoughts about why they're so scared of education?
I think, I fully agree. And I would just also like to add that they just do not want to see women empowered. They do not want to see women in positions. They do not want to see women in leadership. And they have a very strong belief that women are actually not capable. And they also are really scared that...
But they don't want to be proved wrong.
Exactly. Because, they're like, how do we take away every possible opportunity from women so that, they don't scare us by becoming, a woman in a profession. And also, just growing up and being exposed to this narrative, what I realized was that they always try to create this narrative that women become some sort of aliens, some sort of scary creatures when they're empowered. And that they are going to, I don't know, somehow, like something, they're going to just do something horrible to the world or to the society. However, we have seen in our work, and just like women women stepping into more positions, and as we see more and more equality, we are seeing the world becoming a far better place than it was before. And a lot of the Afghan women who have, worked so hard to be in these positions and to get into professions, they are so proud of their culture, of their traditions, that they are not only trying to make a career for themselves, but they're also trying to defend their religion, their culture, their identity, to tell the Taliban that, even within their own culture, they're able to define what freedom means for them. And it's not them who has ownership over what that freedom and what that, culture and all of that means. Like, women should have equal right to be able to define all of that. So this is a question I think about, and sometimes I'm like, it's not even worth thinking about, why they think like that. It's just that they think wrong, and we should be actually challenging them and proving them wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I must say, in a lot of cultures, women have felt it has been necessary for women to be written back into history. They were wiped from any history books or whatever, and all the more so in the context of Afghanistan. And I want to come on now to more about education, because Shabana, you founded the School of Learning in Afghanistan. I think it opened as a boarding school, as I understand it, in 2016 for girls. That must have been a great thrill and a great excitement.
Absolutely.
And you weren't that old.
No, we started as an organization in 2008, a scholarship program, evolved into a full-fledged boarding school for Afghan girls in 2016, and we're still the first and only boarding school for girls in Afghanistan. It was an exciting time. I mean, for those of you here, I'm sure some of you have either attended boarding schools or have children who are currently attending school. Very familiar with the model, but the boarding school model in Afghanistan really became such a radical and revolutionary answer to so many of the barriers that girls across Afghanistan faced and were facing and continue to face in the country. Across Afghanistan, one of the dominant reasons, unlike popular belief in the West, for girls' access, the barrier to girls' access to education was lack of female teachers. We had a huge shortage of female teachers across the country. And so it allowed us to bring girls into a safe, nurturing environment, expose them to high caliber of teachers, great curriculum, and so on. And we opened our doors as a boarding school in 2016 for a group of girls representing several provinces in Afghanistan who joined us in 6th grade. By 2021, we were a school of nearly 100 girls, keeping a low profile intentionally because we were trying to localize the model in the country. 100 girls representing 28 of the 34 provinces. And that was significant because these were girls who were Pashtuns and Tajiks and Uzbeks and Hazaras and Sunnis and Shias. And they were coming into SOLA to meet sisters from different parts of the country. And that sisterhood to this day thrives and where we are in Rwanda.
And then bang, what happened in August 2021?
Taliban took over and we evacuated to Rwanda.
The whole school?
The entire school community, our students, our faculty, staff, and their immediate family members, but not of our students. And there's a wonderful segment on 60 Minutes with Leslie Stahl, where if you're interested, you can learn more about it. And unfortunately, we don't have much time for me to speak about those details. But we evacuated from Afghanistan in August to go to Rwanda. We landed there August 25th, 2021. And 4 days later, we resumed classes for our girls. And those students.
Has your model and vision continued in Rwanda? I mean, have you been able to keep that sense of spirit of solidarity with the girls? Yeah.
We last year we received 3,300 applications from Afghan girls for 30 to 40 spots. That's a 1% admission.
And how many were you able to take?
1%.
Yes.
And I don't share that with pride. There's a lot of anger and sadness mixed into that. A week ago, we announced a new admission season. And today, we have over 1,100 applications already.
But you also have something. You also have something that intrigued me. You have a WhatsApp school. Now, what's that?
Yes. It's precisely because of this demand. We quite simply cannot bring all of those girls who want to come to Rwanda to study at SOLA. So we have looked at ways that we can bring SOLA to them. And a year ago on Monday, we launched a WhatsApp-based online academy called SOLA X. And the challenge to my co-founder and the team was, let's imagine an Afghan girl who has to rely on a borrowed basic smartphone from an older family member, a father or an older sibling or a neighbor, for 30 minutes, whether that's 30 minutes a day or once a week. How do we deliver education to those girls? And when we launched, we imagined that we would reach, in year one, 10,000 learners. Today, we have close to 19,000 learners learning from every single province in the country.
Well, Malala, your Malala Fund has also been doing extraordinary work in helping education of girls in Afghanistan. And I want you to tell me a little about this, and then I think I want to bring you on, because we're always short of time on things like this, onto what you're very passionate about, which is trying to convince the world to have a crime of gender apartheid. But first of all, what you're doing on education, and then come on to.
Yes, so we launched Afghanistan Initiative, and we do two things. One is grant making, and then the second one is advocacy around the gender apartheid campaign, supporting the Afghan women activists, most of whom are in exile, and we're supporting their work. On the project side, we are supporting a lot of the activists who are running these education programs, alternative learning programs, whether that is through radios, television, or even, as you mentioned, like these WhatsApp learning platforms, Signal learning platforms, and some even have offline education content programs, so that even in the absence of the internet, you could still access that. And there are amazing, talented activists who are using everything that is out there to be able to make education accessible. And the way we at Malala Fund think about is that while the Taliban keep girls out of school. We need to do everything that we can in our capacity to take education to girls' homes. Let's make it impossible for the Taliban to stop a girl from learning. This is a form of resistance right now for those girls to keep learning. And we are receiving these messages from them. And this moment when a girl just picks up a book and she's learning, she feels like she's fighting against something, fighting against this oppressive regime that is trying to do everything to stop her from learning, to stop her from following her dreams. And then on the gender apartheid campaign, it is really important because we need to actually
this is a new
criminalize
idea,
it.
A new idea for a new crime of gender apartheid.
So, we have a lot of our allies from South Africa, which is a really important country in this campaign. And I had the honor to... So last year, I gave the Nelson Mandela lecture, and that's when I called everybody to support Afghan women activists in calling what the Taliban are doing a gender apartheid. And then we must hold them accountable for these crimes. We cannot normalize relations with them. We cannot just, accept it okay. They're committing the worst crimes, and they are making it a crime for a girl to enter a classroom and for a woman to dare to work, and we are just looking away. Like, we cannot live in a world like that. So my dream, if somebody asked me for like one dream, I wanted to become a crime for a girl to be banned from school. This should be a crime.
Just, tell us briefly how it goes so far beyond discrimination.
Yes, I think it's the scale of the oppression. The Taliban have issued more than 100 decrees and edicts limiting women in every possible way, from any opportunity that you could think of. This is systematic oppression, and this is complete erasure of women from public life. Complete erasure, as if women do not even exist. That's how absent they want to make women from community, from work, from offices, as if they do not exist. So women are not seen as equal beings. I think that is the reality. And what really worries me is about the future of women and girls everywhere, from all the way from Pakistan to even in the UK, even in the US, where every country in the world, when we are all here at, a Skoll forum, we feel much more global. We're all coming from different parts of the world. So I do think about women's rights, girls' rights in every corner of the world, and how much protection is actually there, and how vulnerable we are. That tomorrow, if an oppressive regime takes control in our country, everything can be taken back from us, from our body rights to our right to work and education. So we should not consider this challenge in Afghanistan, this gender apartheid system in Afghanistan, as a distant issue. I think we should really think about it collectively, and this should be our shared commitment that we share our solidarity with Afghan women activists, we join them, and we ask our countries, we ask our leaders to hold the Taliban accountable for what they're doing, which is a gender apartheid.
I'm going to take that, Malala, as your call to action to this crowd here in Skoll to join in supporting your endeavours to...
And the Crime Against Humanity Treaty, after the activism of a lot of the Afghan activists and our colleagues, has been opened for negotiations. So that is a great opportunity where we can push our governments to step forward and actually include gender in the apartheid definition, because that is a way in which we could make it part of the international law, and that brings in more accountability, and that then holds countries accountable. Those who normalize relations with the Taliban, and it builds more pressure on them as well in how they deal with oppressors like the Taliban as well. And I hope that there's just more justice for Afghan women and girls, and I hope people find ways to share solidarity with them.
Good. And Shabana, your call to action. Come on, you've got a lot of people here now. They're incredible. They're doing so much.
Yeah.
They're your audience.
Absolutely. I will, before I share my call to action, I will say, when it gets really difficult, I think about a future, well into the future, sometimes even beyond my lifetime. And I think about an Afghan father waking up in the morning, preparing breakfast for his daughter, and then sending her off to school, and that being the most ordinary thing. That's an extraordinary reality today. It's not existing.
Yeah.
And so with that, my call to action is quite simple. Don't look away. What does that mean? Afghan women are fighting. They're not giving up. They're educating girls in secret. Families are sending their daughters outside of Afghanistan in pursuit of education, understanding that they may not see them again. They're working every day to keep that light on for their daughters for the future of Afghanistan. I sit here as a product of that Afghan women's bravery. I was educated in the living room of Afghan woman who risked her life and the life of every single member of her family to educate girls like me. That was in the first Taliban regime. And today, when I speak with Afghan women who used to be business owners or civil servants, they tell me they don't have jobs, but today they are focused on transferring their knowledge to the young generation of Afghan women. So join them. Don't look away. There are incredible women who are outside of Afghanistan fighting for Afghan girls and women's rights in Afghanistan, and a lot of Afghan women and men inside Afghanistan who are fighting for that future. And understanding that educated Afghan women always have been and always will be our best allies internationally. So don't look away.
Well, you know, I was going to kind of ask you, but we're out of time, what gives both of you hope? But actually, you give me hope, both of you, because you've talked
You
about
give us
this.
hope, and it's everybody.
Yeah, you've given, you know, such a positive, determined account of an appalling situation, which shouldn't happen ever, and is happening in the 21st century in our world, that girls and women are totally excluded. Women can't even have a voice in public, can't have a job. You were saying earlier to me, girls can't become doctors or nurses anymore, or midwives, but also they can't go to a male doctor. So, you know, I mean, just the whole shuttering. And yet, the way you talk about it, you clearly understand, and I saw that from the previous Taliban when I was there in 2002, and I met these incredible women who knew what they wanted in their charter for women's rights. And I've no doubt, you know, women coming through the current Taliban will have the same idea. They give us hope, I think, and you are great champions for them, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really been great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.